Walking 10,000 steps a day takes a lot of time, depending on your speed, about 90 minutes at least. But if you're someone who feels like you just don't have that time, you've probably been wondering if you actually need 10,000 steps a day, or if you just don't like walking or get bored easily, can you actually also replace it with things like biking or dancing or just working out at the gym? And why do we even need walking? What does it actually do for your body? In this video, I'll answer all of these questions and debunk the 10K steps myth with what science actually says about step counting. First of all, how many steps do you actually need according to science to reap most of the benefits, and at what point do the benefits of walking diminish? So there's one study that followed over 2,000 adults for almost 11 years, which is a good amount of time, and people who hit at least 7,000 steps a day compared to the people who walked less had a 50 to 70% lower risk of dying during that time. But there's an even bigger study. Going from 2,000 to 4,000 steps a day already cuts your risk of dying by about 36%. Around 7,000 to 8,000 steps a day captured most of the meaningful benefit, and not just for mortality, but also things like depression, heart disease, diabetes, dementia even. But according to this meta-analysis, 10,000 steps a day compared to 7.5 on average steps a day barely added any significant benefits on top of that. At least if we're talking about things like heart disease, disease risk in general, and mortality rate. Now, does that mean you need 7,000 to 8,000 steps a day every day? Or is it more about your weekly average? Unfortunately, there is no really high quality research yet out there looking exactly at your weekly step count, but only at your daily step count. There is one study though, which is also pretty high quality, that found that people who hit at least 8,000 steps on just 1 or 2 days a week still had a substantially lower mortality risk than people who never hit that number. So probably the best thing you can do is to walk 7,000 to 8,000 steps every day. But if it's easy for you to walk more on certain days and less on other days, that's still better than walking less overall. It's as always about consistency and not going all in for a week or so and then sitting on your couch all day long every day again. Okay, so the science basically says that with 7,000 to 8,000 steps, you're reaping most of the benefits, depending on your goals, which we will talk about in a minute. But first, where does that number 10,000 even come from if it did not come from science? Well, as so often, when health advice is not based on science, this number came from marketers, specifically from marketers of a Japanese company called Yamasa back in 1965. Yamasa was building one of the first wearable pedometers, you know, the little things that you can clip on your waistband that count your steps, because back then we didn't have smartphones or smart rings that could count our steps. And they needed a name for this device, so they called it Manpoke. Manpoke, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Japanese people, feel free to comment below. And in Japanese, that literally means 10,000 steps meter. So why did they choose that 10,000 steps if it wasn't based on science? Well, no one really knows. Probably because it just sounds nice, and back then already we knew that walking was kind of beneficial. There's also one theory going around that thinks that that number comes from the fact that the Japanese sign, or character, I think is what you call it, for 10,000 kind of looks like a walking man. And because that number sounds great, because it's round and easy to remember, even companies like Apple, for Apple Health, and basically any activity tracker that you can find, just put 10,000 steps as the average step goal in their devices. So we know that the number is kind of made up, but you're probably struggling with walking more, not only because it takes a lot of time, but also because it's effortful. And there is that friction between your body, your couch or your chair, and you actually going outside. You have to get off the couch, put your shoes on, bend down, tie your laces, get out the door, and then if you're a klutz like me, deal with your laces coming undone halfway through your walk and nearly tripping over them. But fortunately, today's sponsor Upalee can help a lot with that friction, because they invented shoes that are 100% hands-free and adjustable without ever using your hands, and without any shoelaces that can come undone while you're walking. The system that they use is called Zero Tie Fit system, where you just step in the shoe, no hands, no bending down needed, and then there's a small wheel at the heel which you roll back with your other foot, and it tightens the laces, and you can adjust that by rolling a bit more, which makes the shoe a bit tighter, or a bit less, which makes it more loose, which is very good in the heat wave we have right now, and when your feet are swollen like mine like crazy. And you can also just as easily take them off or loosen them, which is always very nice if you don't have to bend down and, you know, untie your shoes when you have your hands full with your groceries, for example. But not only are they super practical and comfortable, but also I think they're really pretty, which I think is really hard to find in practical clothing. The style that I have here is called the Toledo, which is made of a soft suede mix with a more structured woven texture, which I think is really pretty. And they're also genuinely durable because the zero tie system has been tested with over 100,000 tightening cycles, so that we don't have to be worried for them to fall apart or, you know, not be tightening as we want them to tighten anytime soon. If you want your own pair and 15% off, use the code and the link in my description. And now let's talk about that when it comes to walking, sometimes more is actually more, because there's a lot more to walking than just health benefits like reduced disease risk or reduced mortality rate. Namely, above all, increased NEAT. NEAT stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which in simpler terms is just the energy or calories your body burns with moving outside of exercise, which includes things like walking, but talking with your hands, fidgeting, standing. And walking is one of the best ways, the most efficient or effective ways to increase that NEAT, depending on your body size and how fit you are, how fast you walk. But on average, 10,000 steps a day can burn 300 to 500 calories. That means you're burning a lot of calories by just walking. If you're someone who wouldn't mind losing a little bit of body fat, walking is one of the best things you can do to get there. And even if you think you don't have the time, something that I like to do to get my steps in is whenever I do some brainstorming, I just take my phone, do voice noting or talk to AI a little bit and do that on a walk. Or even simple tasks. For example, when I'm answering comments of you guys, thank you always for commenting, say hi in the comments. I often do that while walking, because that's not something I have to do on my laptop, for example. I can just easily, walk through the park and be on my phone a little bit and just, be careful that I don't run into someone, but usually it's kind of doable if you're not in a too crowded area. But walking more than 8,000 steps not only helps with increasing the calories that your body burns, but also it means that the more you walk, the less you sit. And sitting is today's smoking. You've probably heard that term before, and there's really a lot of truth to that, because sitting is really detrimental to our health in so many ways. Sitting for long periods of times without breaking up that sitting has clearly been linked to a higher risk of things like heart disease and again early dying, regardless of how much you exercise outside of that sitting. So even if you do go to the gym or you go on a run, that's amazing. But if during the day that means that you're sitting for 10 hours straight, that increases your risk of certain diseases and dying early. But by walking more during the day, by having little chunks, for example 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes after lunch, 30 minutes after dinner, you break up your sitting periods, and by that you help your health and your overall well-being a lot, which is backed by research. Similarly, walking helps with balancing your blood sugar, which does not necessarily mean that you have to walk 10,000 steps or more. The more the better, but still, whenever you eat, especially if you walk after that, that can help balance your blood sugar. So they're kind of the more the better, especially if you eat a lot of carbs, especially a lot of simple carbs. Walking kind of soaks up those carbs from your bloodstream, which helps your blood sugar to stay a little bit more stable. And having a stable blood sugar is very important for many things, including, again, disease risk like diabetes risk, but also things like energy, for example, which is also why if you walk more, especially after eating, you tend to have less energy crashes later in the day. And also, by the way, less cravings for sweet stuff. And also, walking can be a really powerful remedy for your mental health. And there, sometimes, at least personally, I find more is more often, in very stressful phases, walking is keeping me sane. And also, it helps with sleep. More is more when it comes to the mental health effect of walking. But what if walking is merely your thing? You think it's boring, or you just, you don't like to do it. Can you actually replace it by other types of movement, for example, biking or dancing? And what about the gym? Does that count? Now, things like biking, running, dancing, all of these things are great for your cardio. And walking is also a form of very light cardio. So it is very healthy for you, yes. And movement of any kind is always good. And these things are also good for your blood sugar and also for your mental health. So yes, it is kind of similar. There's no clear research comparing the benefits of walking to benefits of running or biking or dancing, but movement is what counts. Especially when you do these forms of exercises sprinkled into your day, like you could with walking, which is actually something that I like to do. Sometimes when I take a little work break, I just dance to one or two of my favorite songs. Or when I have to run an errand and I don't want to walk, or it's too far away to walk, I take my bike to get there. And that obviously also helps with moving your body and, getting your blood circulated, stabilizing your blood sugar level, helping with your mental health, all of that. Although these forms of exercises do not officially count towards your NEAT, they obviously also burn calories. Brian Johnson actually recently, I saw that on Instagram, posted the recommendation to not only doing walks after your meals or, in general, breaking up your sitting by doing walks, but you can also just as well do air squats. He specifically said that 10 squats every 45 minutes beats a 30-minute walk for blood sugar and potentially also for the other benefits. And there's actually a study behind this, but that study is kind of small and preliminary, so there's no clear science. Main verdict, main idea, I think logically makes sense, even if there's no clear science. Any type of movement is better than no movement. Probably the more the better if you have the time, if you have the resources, whatever you can do consistently, and if possible, try to sprinkle it throughout your day and throughout your week. The more regular, the more of the benefits, especially because it breaks up your sitting. And by the way, this question, whether you should actually be walking 10,000 steps a day or not, and tips on how to replace that potentially, and what science even says about all of these things, this is a very good example of what I write about in my weekly newsletter, which is completely free, and I do a lot of myth busting there, citing research as always, or just sharing, my personal tips on how I make my healthy lifestyle as easy as possible, because I like living a normal life as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest benefits of walking a lot is increasing your NEAT, which is one of the, if not the biggest lever you have if you want to be in a calorie deficit in a healthy way. But like I just mentioned, there are other ways next to walking how you can increase your NEAT. In this video right here, I share very small habits that you can sprinkle into your day to increase your NEAT very effectively. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one.